My friends, before we speak of truth, before we attempt to understand anything at all, let us come together in a moment of quietness. Not the quietness that the human mind tries to achieve by force or discipline, but that deeper quietness which naturally descends when we stop reaching outward and allow ourselves to rest. For truth does not enter consciousness through activity. It reveals itself only where there is receptivity. As the psalmist said, "Be still and know that I am God." Not be active and know, not strive and know, but be still. We are gathered here not to acquire something new, not to improve a practice, not to refine a method. We are here to let go of misunderstanding, let go of mental effort, let go of the belief that truth must be made effective by human action. For the truth of God does not require our assistance. It requires only our willingness to stand aside. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. This is not poetry. It is a spiritual law. Today we turn our attention to a question that quietly troubles many sincere seekers, though it is seldom spoken aloud. Why is it that words once filled with promise, words that seemed powerful, words spoken with faith and hope, gradually lose their effect? Why is it that affirmations, especially those built around the sacred words "I am," sometimes bring a sense of uplift at first, and then seem to fall silent? The human mind quickly assumes failure of faith, failure of discipline, failure of consistency. But the failure is not in you, and it is not in truth. It lies in a misunderstanding so subtle that it often passes unnoticed. Let us be clear from the beginning. This is not a teaching against sincerity, nor against devotion, nor against the longing for harmony, health, or peace. God knows the heart, and man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. The desire for wholeness is holy. The desire for freedom is holy. But even holy desire can be misdirected when understanding is incomplete. We are not here to condemn affirmations, nor to replace one practice with another. That would only perpetuate the same pattern. We are here to discern the difference between truth as revelation and truth as a tool. For the moment truth becomes something we attempt to use, it ceases to function as truth. It becomes an object of the human mind, and the human mind, no matter how sincere, cannot wield God. When Moses stood before the burning bush and asked for a name, the answer he received was not a technique, not a formula, not a method for deliverance. The voice spoke simply, "I am that I am." And the Lord said, "Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you." This was not instruction for repetition. It was revelation of being. It was not something to be spoken from the lips. It was something to be recognized in consciousness. And yet, across centuries, the human mind has taken this holy revelation and attempted to make use of it. We have taken the name of God and fastened it to human conditions. We have said, "I am sick, I am afraid, I am lacking." And then, sensing the pain of these declarations, we have attempted to reverse them with spiritual language. But nowhere did the Master teach us to correct appearances by verbal assertion. He taught us to know the truth, and he said plainly, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Truth makes free, not words about truth, not statements of truth, but truth itself known. So let us begin this unfolding, not with answers, but with humility. Let us acknowledge that there may be something here we have not yet seen. If any man think that he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing yet as he ought to know. This is not a rebuke, it is an invitation to step out of the realm of doing and into the realm of being. As we move forward together, let us agree on this. We are not trying to make anything happen. We are not here to get God to do something. to change something or to fix something. We are here to listen. For Jesus said, "My doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me." He did not speak from the standpoint of a human teacher offering methods. He spoke from the standpoint of divine presence revealing itself. And if we will listen not with the ears, but with the heart, if we will allow these words to pass beyond thought and sink into awareness, we may begin to perceive why the very effort to use I am as a tool contains the seed of its own failure. But that understanding will not come through analysis. It will come as all true understanding comes, quietly, gently, in the stillness where God alone speaks. Let us rest there now, at the threshold of understanding, without reaching ahead, without trying to anticipate what comes next. For revelation unfolds only in order, and only to the degree that consciousness is willing to be still. My friends, having entered this quiet ground together, let us now look gently, very gently, at how the sacred words I am have come to be used in our time, not with judgment, not with criticism, but with discernment. For discernment is not condemnation. It is simply the light by which misunderstanding dissolves. In every age, truth is revealed, and in every age the human mind attempts to capture it. What begins as revelation slowly becomes doctrine, and what is doctrine soon becomes method. This is not because humanity is unfaithful, but because the human mind is restless and seeks control. It wants something to do, something to repeat, something to apply, and so even the most sacred utterance is eventually turned into a practice. Today we hear the words I am spoken everywhere. They are spoken with hope, with longing, with sincerity. People rise in the morning and declare, I am strong, I am whole, I am abundant. Others repeat these words before sleep, believing that the subconscious mind will be impressed and life reshaped accordingly. And for a time, there may indeed be a sense of uplift, a feeling of encouragement, even a temporary easing of fear. Let us not deny this. The human mind responds to reassurance, but reassurance is not revelation. Here is where the drift occurs so quietly that few ever notice it. The words I am, which were revealed as the name of God, become attached to the conditions of human existence. The sacred is fastened to the personal. The infinite is enlisted in the service of the finite. And without realizing it, the human sense of self assumes a position it was never meant to occupy. The position of one who uses God, yet the scripture declares plainly, I am the Lord, and there is none else. Not God and man together shaping reality, not God responding to human command, but God alone. The moment we imagine that a personal sense of me can speak I am in order to improve its circumstances, we have already stepped out of revelation and into manipulation, even if the manipulation is clothed in spiritual language. The Master never taught his disciples to say, I am healed, or I am prosperous, or I am protected, as statements to be used against appearances. He healed by seeing. He supplied by knowing. He rested in the Father and let the Father's nature reveal itself. He said, I can of mine own self do nothing. And this, my friends, was not a confession of weakness. It was a statement of divine order. In our modern use of I am, something subtle but profound has taken place. We have shifted from listening to speaking, from beholding to declaring, from surrender to assertion, and the human mind, eager for results, mistakes repetition for realization. But truth does not respond to insistence. God is not persuaded by words. Your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask him. This is why, over time, the words lose their power, not because they were wrong, but because they were never meant to be used in that way. The power was never in the statement. It was in the consciousness from which the statement arose. Jesus did not say, "I am," in order to become something. He spoke "I am" from the standpoint of being. When the human self says "I am," it is almost always completing the sentence with a condition, a desire, or a hope. But when God says "I am," the sentence is complete. There is nothing to add. There is no future fulfillment implied. There is only eternal presence. Before Abraham was, I am. Not I was, not I will be, but I am, outside of time, condition, and circumstance. The tragedy, if we may use that word, is not that people use affirmations. The tragedy is that they are never told that revelation cannot be used. Truth cannot be employed. God cannot be directed. And yet, the human mind persists, believing that if it speaks the right words often enough, life will be compelled to obey. This belief itself is the barrier, so we must see this clearly, but kindly. The modern use of "I am" has drifted from revelation into effort, from surrender into assertion, from listening into speaking. And wherever effort enters, grace withdraws, not as punishment, but because effort assumes separation. God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. Pride, in this sense, is not arrogance. It is the belief that the human self can do something with God. If we are willing to see this, truly see it, without defending our practices or condemning ourselves, something beautiful begins to happen. The need to repeat falls away. The urge to control softens, and we begin, perhaps for the first time, to wonder whether the power of "I am" was never meant to be spoken outwardly at all, but heard inwardly. That wondering is holy ground, and from that ground, a deeper understanding is about to unfold. My friends, we now arrive at a point of great importance, one that lies at the very heart of this teaching. It is an error so subtle that it has woven itself into nearly every form of religious and metaphysical practice, and yet it is this very error that prevents truth from being realized. The error is simply this: the belief that the human self can use God. This belief does not announce itself loudly. It does not appear as irreverence. On the contrary, it often comes clothed in devotion, in sincerity, even in humility, and yet beneath it lies an assumption that must be exposed to the light of spiritual discernment. The assumption is that there is a personal me standing apart from God, who can call upon God, direct God, or employ divine truth for human purposes. But the scripture speaks with unmistakable clarity. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, one, not two, not God and man working together, not God responding to man's initiative, but one. Where there is one, there can be no user and no thing to be used. There can only be being. The moment we say, "I will use truth to change my condition," we have already divided life into two parts: a limited self that lacks, and a divine power that supplies. Yet Jesus never taught two selves. He revealed one self. I and my Father are one, not aligned, not cooperating, but one. And in that oneness, all sense of personal authority disappeared. This is why the Master could say, without contradiction, the Son can do nothing of himself but what he seeth the Father do. He was not confessing incapacity. He was revealing the nature of spiritual identity. There was no separate actor, no personal will attempting to direct divine power. There was only the Father expressing himself. The human mind, however, is uncomfortable with this truth. It wishes to retain a sense of authorship. It wants to be the one who prays, the one who affirms, the one who brings about change. And so it invents a partnership. God provides the power, and man provides the direction. But this partnership exists nowhere in spiritual law. Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. When we attempt to use I am, we unknowingly place ourselves in the position of a second power. We say, in effect, I, the human self, will speak the name of God in order to produce an effect. Yet the very name I am denies the existence of a second self. It allows no companion, no assistant, no co-creator. It stands alone. This is why the effort fails, not immediately, perhaps, but inevitably, for truth cannot be bent to human will. God cannot be impressed, persuaded, or directed. The prophet Isaiah spoke plainly. My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. And again, I am God, and there is none else. I am God, and there is none like me. Here, then, is the fundamental error laid bare, the attempt of the human self to do something with God. As long as this belief remains, there will be struggle, repetition, disappointment, and the quiet sense that something is missing. Not because God withholds himself, but because the belief in separation blocks recognition. And yet, there is no condemnation here. This error is not corrected by trying harder, nor by abandoning all practice in frustration. It is corrected by understanding. When the light of understanding dawns, the effort to use God falls away naturally, just as darkness disappears when the sun rises. When we see that there is no personal self capable of wielding divine power, a great burden lifts. The responsibility to make life work is no longer ours. The anxiety of getting truth right dissolves. We begin to glimpse what Jesus meant when he said, "Take no thought for your life." He was not teaching neglect. He was revealing trust in divine being. So let us rest here for a moment in this recognition, not as a conclusion, but as a doorway. For once the illusion of two selves begins to dissolve, we are prepared to see why affirmations may appear to work for a time, and why they cannot sustain themselves without a deeper shift of identity. That unfolding now lies before us. My friends, at this point in our unfolding, a quiet question may arise within you, and it is an honest one. You may say within yourself, "But I have spoken these words. I have used these affirmations, and at times something did change. How then can this be a misunderstanding?" Let us not dismiss this question, for truth is never threatened by honest inquiry. Rather, let us look at it calmly, without haste and without defense. It is true that affirmations sometimes appear to work. They may bring a sense of comfort, a lifting of discouragement, a momentary peace. The troubled mind may grow quiet for a time. Fear may loosen its grip. Even the body may respond with a temporary sense of relief. These experiences are not imaginary, nor are they to be condemned, but neither are they the fruit of spiritual realization. What is happening in such moments is not the operation of divine law, but the adjustment of human consciousness. The human mind, when reassured, relaxes, and when it relaxes, the tension that sustains discord may lessen. This is a natural phenomenon. Even a kind word, even hope, even distraction can bring such effects. But these are changes within the realm of human belief, and what is built upon belief must eventually shift again. The Master never relied on belief. He did not heal by convincing the human mind of something better. He healed by seeing what was eternally true. When he stood before Lazarus' tomb, he did not affirm life to overcome death. He said, "Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always." This was not a statement aimed at producing an effect. It was an acknowledgement of eternal reality. Affirmations appear to work when they momentarily quiet resistance. They bring the human mind into a state of expectancy, perhaps even surrender. In that softened state, harmony may surface. But because identity has not shifted, because the sense of a personal self-managing life remains intact, the old patterns eventually return. The calm fades. The fear resurfaces. The words are repeated, often with greater intensity, and the seeker wonders why the effect is no longer the same. This is not failure. It is exposure. Exposure of the fact that no amount of repetition can replace revelation. The Apostle Paul wrote, "The letter killeth, but the Spirit giveth life." Words alone, even sacred words, are letters. It is the Spirit, the consciousness behind them, that gives life. There is another reason affirmations sometimes appear effective, and it lies in the longing of the heart. When a seeker speaks words of hope, there is often, beneath the words, a genuine reaching for God. And God is always present. In those moments, the heart may touch something deeper than the words themselves, but the human mind quickly claims the experience and attributes it to the practice rather than to grace. Grace does not respond to method. Grace responds to openness. The Lord is nigh unto all them that call upon him, to all that call upon him in truth. To call upon God in truth is not to repeat phrases, but to stand without pretense, without effort, without trying to be something other than what one is, and to let the false sense of self grow quiet. And so we see that affirmations may appear to work, not because they are true in themselves, but because, for a moment, they lead the seeker towards stillness. But stillness achieved by words is fragile. It must be maintained. It must be repeated. And eventually, it collapses under the weight of effort. This is why many sincere seekers grow weary. They sense that something deeper must exist, something more stable, something that does not depend on constant mental activity. And they are right, for truth is not sustained by practice. Truth sustains itself. If we can see this without disappointment, without self-blame, we are ready for the next unveiling. For the moment affirmations fail is not the moment of loss, it is the moment of invitation. An invitation to move beyond effects and into cause, beyond words and into consciousness, beyond doing and into being. My friends, there comes a moment in the journey of nearly every sincere seeker when the words that once seemed powerful no longer carry the same weight. The affirmations are spoken, perhaps more faithfully than ever, yet the expected change does not appear. The mind repeats the phrases, but the heart grows tired, and in that moment, a quiet discouragement may arise, accompanied by a subtle fear. Have I lost my faith? Am I doing something wrong? Let us be very clear here. This moment is not a failure. It is a sign of progress. It is the moment when the soul begins to recognize that truth cannot be carried by effort. What is failing is not truth, but a method that was never meant to bear the weight of revelation. When affirmations fail, it is because identity has not shifted. The same personal sense of self remains at the center, watching, waiting, evaluating, hoping that the words will produce an effect. And as long as there is someone waiting for results, there is separation. There is a me here and a hope for good over there. But Jesus never stood outside of good seeking to obtain it. He lived from the consciousness of being. The Master said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." Notice that he did not say, "Declare these things into being," nor "affirm your way into the kingdom." He pointed to a shift of consciousness. The kingdom is not something to be produced. It is something to be recognized. And when it is recognized, the outer harmonies follow not by effort, but by law. The human mind does not easily surrender its position as doer. Even in spiritual practice, it wishes to remain active. It wants to fix, improve, correct, and manage life. And so, when affirmations cease to work, the mind often responds by increasing effort, more repetition, stronger emotion, greater intensity. But intensity is not depth, and truth is never revealed through strain. The reason affirmations fail is not that the words are untrue. It is that they are being spoken from the wrong standpoint. They are spoken from the standpoint of one who believes himself to be separate from God. And from that standpoint, no truth can be realized. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the spirit is spirit. Flesh cannot speak spirit into being. Spirit reveals itself when flesh grows silent. This is the critical point. As long as the human self believes itself to be the one who must declare truth in order to experience harmony, identity has not shifted. The center of consciousness remains in the personal sense of I, and it is this personal I that becomes weary, discouraged, and confused when results do not appear. Yet the divine I am never tires. It never hopes. It never waits. It simply is. I am the same yesterday, and today, and forever. The divine identity does not repeat truth to make it true. Truth is already true. God does not affirm himself. God expresses himself. When affirmations stop working, it is because the soul is being invited to stop speaking and begin listening. The failure of words is the doorway to silence, and silence is not emptiness. Silence is the absence of the false claimant to identity. In this moment, the seeker may feel lost, but what is actually happening is that the ground beneath effort is dissolving, and when effort dissolves, grace can be felt. The prophet Elijah did not hear God in the wind, nor in the earthquake, nor in the fire. He heard God in the still, small voice. That voice is not heard while the mind is busy declaring. So let us not rush past this moment. Let us not attempt to fix it. Let us not replace one set of words with another. Let us allow the failure of affirmations to do its sacred work, for it is loosening our attachment to method and preparing us for recognition. When identity shifts, affirmations are no longer needed, not because they are forbidden, but because they become unnecessary. The soul no longer seeks to convince itself of truth. It begins to rest in what eternally is. And now, having seen why affirmations fail, we are ready to look more deeply into the nature of the words themselves. For I am was never given as a statement to be completed, but as a revelation to be recognized. My friends, we come now to a clarification so essential that without it the words I am can never be understood in their true meaning. These words were never intended as a statement to be completed by the human mind. They were never meant to be followed by conditions, descriptions, or desires. They were never given as a sentence fragment waiting for improvement. They were given as an announcement. When God spoke from the burning bush, the voice did not say, I am becoming, nor I am what you need me to be, nor I am that which will help you. The voice spoke simply and eternally. I am that I am. This was not information. It was revelation. It was not God telling Moses what to say. It was God revealing what is. An announcement does not seek agreement. It does not persuade. It does not argue. It simply declares what already is. And this is the nature of divine truth. When Jesus spoke the words, "I am," he was not affirming an identity in order to attain power. He was announcing the presence of divine being already in expression. I am the light of the world. I am the resurrection and the life. These were not claims made by a man. They were revelations of the Christ presence speaking through him. The human mind, however, hears these words as statements, and a statement, by its nature, invites response. It invites agreement or disagreement. It invites repetition. It invites effort. But an announcement requires nothing. It stands complete. It asks only to be heard. When we take the words "I am" and add to them, "I am healthy," "I am successful," "I am protected," we turn an announcement into a statement of hope. And hope, however sincere, implies absence. Hope implies that something is not yet realized. But the divine "I am" is never future. It is always present. Now are we the sons of God. Not later, not after improvement, not after realization, now. Jesus never used "I am" to overcome a condition. He never stood before illness and said, "I am well," as though to contradict appearances. He stood in the awareness of divine presence, and in that awareness, appearances dissolved. He did not speak at disease. He spoke from truth. And there is all the difference in the world between the two. An announcement is heard only when there is silence. A statement seeks repetition. An announcement reveals itself once and forever. This is why the power of "I am" cannot be sustained through continual speaking. It was never meant to be sustained by the human voice. It was meant to be recognized by spiritual awareness. The Apostle John wrote, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The Word was not a sentence. It was not language. It was being. And when the Word is understood in this way, it is no longer something we say. It is something we are aware of. The tragedy of turning "I am" into a statement is that it places the human self in the position of speaker and God in the position of listener. But God does not listen to man's declarations in order to respond. God speaks, and when God speaks, creation appears. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. There was no repetition. There was no effort. There was recognition. When "I am" is heard as an announcement, it silences the human sense of self. There is no room left for becoming, no room left for striving. The announcement of "I am" ends the search, because it reveals that what is sought is already present. And so the question before us is not, how shall I use these words, but how shall I become still enough to hear what they are announcing? For when "I am" is heard inwardly, without mental addition, without personal intention, it reveals itself as the life of your own being. In that hearing, something profound occurs. The words fall away, and only presence remains. And where presence is recognized, effort is no longer required. My friends, having seen that "I am" was given as an announcement and not as a statement to be completed, we are now prepared to understand something even more subtle, yet of great consequence. It is this: the human mind is not capable of speaking as "I am." This is not a limitation to be overcome, nor a flaw to be corrected. It is simply the nature of things. The human mind functions within time. It remembers the past and anticipates the future. It reasons, compares, judges, and evaluates. It deals always with what appears to be changing. But I am stands outside of time. I am knows no past and no future. I am is not becoming, it is being, and therefore, whatever speaks from time cannot truthfully speak from eternity. When the human mind says, I am, it almost always means I am becoming, or I am hoping to be, or I am trying to be. Even when it uses spiritual language, it speaks from the standpoint of a personal history and a projected future. But the divine I am knows neither history nor projection. It is the eternal now. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, saith the Lord. This is why the effort to speak I am from the human mind inevitably collapses. The mind senses that something is wrong, though it may not know why. It repeats the words, yet they feel hollow. It declares truth, yet something within remains unconvinced. And that something is not resisting truth, it is recognizing that truth is not being spoken from its rightful source. Jesus did not say, I am as a mental assertion. He did not rehearse identity. He did not attempt to persuade himself or others of his oneness with the Father. He spoke from that oneness. And because he spoke from it, there was no effort in his speech. There was authority, but not personal authority. There was certainty, but not human confidence. The words that I speak unto you, I speak not of myself, but the Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. Here we must pause and let this be heard deeply. The Father speaks. The human self does not. The Christ consciousness speaks. The personal sense of me remains silent. This is not something to practice. It is something to recognize. As long as the human mind believes itself to be the speaker of truth, it remains in the position of separation. The Apostle Paul understood this when he said, I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. He did not say, I affirm that Christ lives in me. He spoke from realization. The personal I had yielded its place, and in that yielding, the divine self could be known. This is why silence is so central to spiritual realization. Not silence as a technique, not silence as an exercise, but silence as the natural state when the false sense of self steps aside. In that silence, truth does not need to be spoken. It reveals itself. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength. The human mind cannot speak as I am because I am is not a thought. It is consciousness itself. And consciousness does not need to declare itself to be real. It simply is. When the mind grows quiet enough to stop naming, labeling, and claiming, awareness begins to recognize itself as the presence that has always been there. This is not a loss. It is liberation. The burden of speaking truth correctly falls away. The anxiety of maintaining spiritual practice dissolves. One no longer wonders whether one is saying the right words or believing strongly enough. The human mind rests, and in that rest, the divine self stands revealed. So, when we discover that the human mind cannot speak as I am, we are not being deprived of something. We are being freed from a task that was never ours. We are being invited to stop trying to say truth and to let truth be known. And this prepares us for the next unfolding. For when the human mind ceases to speak, something else begins to happen. What we once tried to affirm begins to be recognized. And recognition, unlike affirmation, requires no effort and sustains itself without strain. My friends, when the human mind at last grows weary of speaking, something extraordinary begins to take place. There is a subtle turning, almost unnoticed at first, in which the effort to declare truth gives way to a willingness to behold it. This turning marks the true transition in spiritual life, the shift from affirmation to recognition. Affirmation belongs to the realm of effort. It assumes that something must be stated, repeated, or impressed upon consciousness in order for harmony to appear. Recognition, however, belongs to the realm of revelation. It assumes nothing, seeks nothing, and asks nothing. It rests in what eternally is. And herein lies the great difference. Affirmation tries to bring truth into experience, while recognition discovers that truth has always been present. Recognition is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with emotion or excitement. It often comes quietly, like dawn breaking without sound. One does not feel as though something new has been attained. Rather, one senses that something false has fallen away. The strain of becoming spiritual softens. The pressure to maintain faith dissolves. And in that gentle release, awareness begins to rest in being. The scriptures speak often of this seeing. Having eyes, see ye not, Jesus asked. He did not say, having words, speak ye not, nor did he say, having affirmations, repeat ye not. He pointed to perception, to the capacity to behold what God is revealing. Recognition is spiritual sight. It is the awakening of the inner eye. When recognition dawns, the words I am no longer arise as something to be spoken. They are felt as presence. One does not think, I am protected, and wait for reassurance. One becomes aware of a presence in which protection is inherent. One does not say, I am supplied, and watch conditions anxiously. One rests in a consciousness where supply is recognized as an activity of divine being. This is why recognition cannot be practiced. Practice implies repetition, and repetition implies effort. Recognition happens when effort ceases. Except ye become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. A child does not affirm life. A child lives. A child does not declare existence. A child exists. So it is with spiritual recognition. In recognition, the personal self fades into the background, not destroyed, not denied, but seen for what it is, an appearance, not an identity. The center of awareness shifts from I am trying to experience God to God is experiencing himself as me. This is not a thought to be held. It is a realization to be lived. Goldsmith often reminded his students that truth reveals itself only to the degree that we are willing to be still. Stillness is not inactivity. It is the absence of the false sense of doership. In that stillness, the recognition of God's presence arises naturally. And when it arises, it requires no reinforcement. The prophet Habakkuk wrote, "The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him." This silence is not imposed. It is the natural response to recognition. When the presence is felt, words fall away. The need to affirm disappears because the need to convince has vanished. And here we must understand something essential. Recognition does not change the outer world directly. It changes the standpoint from which the world is perceived. And when perception changes, experience follows, not by manipulation, but by alignment. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, not as he speaks with his lips, but as he abides in consciousness. In this shift from affirmation to recognition, spiritual life becomes simple. There is no longer a sense of managing consciousness, no longer a need to monitor thoughts constantly. One begins to live from a deeper center, where awareness is grounded in being rather than becoming. And from that center, harmony unfolds of its own accord. So let us not attempt to force recognition. Let us not try to abandon affirmations prematurely. Let us simply be willing to notice when the effort to speak truth no longer satisfies. That dissatisfaction is holy. It is the soul's signal that it is ready to rest. And in that resting, recognition dawns not as an achievement, but as a remembrance that the I am was never something we had to say. It was always something we had to be aware of. My friends, we now come to a truth that the human mind often resists, yet the soul quietly recognizes as familiar. It is this: silence accomplishes what words never could. Not silence as a practice, not silence as discipline, but silence as the natural condition in which the false sense of self withdraws and the presence of God stands revealed. Words belong to the realm of form. They arise in thought, are shaped by belief, and are spoken within time. Silence, however, belongs to the realm of being. It is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of the personal claimant. It is the state in which there is no one trying to become spiritual, no one attempting to make truth effective, no one standing apart from God. When the scriptures tell us that Elijah did not hear God in the wind, nor in the earthquake, nor in the fire, but in the still, small voice, they are pointing us away from outer demonstration and toward inner discernment. That still, small voice is not heard by the intellect. It is recognized by awareness, and awareness does not speak, it knows. The human mind trusts words because words give it something to do. Silence gives it nothing. And this is precisely why silence is feared. In silence, the mind cannot manage, direct, or control. It must surrender its authority. And yet, it is only in that surrender that divine authority can be felt, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. Silence does not persuade God to act. Silence reveals that God has never ceased acting. When the human mind grows quiet, the divine activity that has always been present becomes evident. Healing does not occur because silence fixes something. Healing occurs because silence removes the belief that something was wrong with the self. Jesus often withdrew from the crowds. He went into the desert, into the mountain, into solitude, not to prepare speeches, not to rehearse truth, but to abide in the Father. And from that abiding came clarity, authority, and peace. And in the morning, rising up a great while before day, he went out and departed into a solitary place, and there prayed. Prayer, in its highest sense, is not speaking, it is listening. In silence, there is no I affirming truth. There is only truth revealing itself. The human self does not disappear by force. It simply becomes irrelevant. And when the false sense of identity fades into the background, the divine identity stands unobstructed. This is why silence heals without effort. There is no one left to heal. Words attempt to shape experience. Silence allows experience to conform to reality. Words argue with appearances. Silence sees through them. Words attempt to replace fear with courage. Silence reveals that fear had no place to exist. Perfect love casteth out fear. Love does not shout fear away. Fear dissolves in its presence. Silence is not something we enter by will. It descends when effort ceases. It appears when the need to do something spiritual gives way to the willingness to let God be God. In that silence, the I am is no longer spoken. It is felt as the very substance of awareness, And here is the great secret. Silence is not empty. It is full of life, intelligence, order, and peace. It is the womb of revelation. From it arises guidance without seeking, supply without effort, healing without struggle. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. When we understand this, the longing to affirm softens. The urge to repeat phrases diminishes, not because we have been told to stop, but because we have discovered something deeper. We have found the place where truth does not need reinforcement. So let us cherish silence, not as a tool, but as a sanctuary, not as something we create, but as something we allow. In that silence, words become unnecessary and truth becomes self-evident. And from this understanding, a deeper clarity now unfolds, one that reveals the rightful function of the sacred words themselves and how they are to be heard rather than spoken. My friends, having come to understand the place of silence, we are now prepared to perceive the true function of the sacred words I am. These words were never given to humanity as instruments to be employed, nor as phrases to be repeated, nor as declarations to be shaped according to circumstance. Their true function is far more subtle and far more profound. They are not meant to be spoken outwardly, they are meant to be heard inwardly. The moment we hear I am as something we say, we have already missed its meaning. For who is the speaker? Is it the body? Is it the mind? Is it the accumulation of memories and experiences that constitute the human sense of self? None of these can truthfully speak as I am. The true function of these words is not expression but revelation. They reveal the presence that is already speaking long before the human mind forms a thought. When Jesus spoke the words I am, he was not calling attention to himself as a man. He was allowing the divine self to announce its own nature. He that hath seen me hath seen the Father. Not because the Father resembled a human form, but because the consciousness shining through that form was the Father. The words did not create that reality. They unveiled it. The true function of I am is to arrest the human mind. When heard rightly, the words stop thought. They halt the endless chain of becoming. They bring consciousness into the present moment where God alone is. There is nothing to add to I am. There is no condition to attach, no future to anticipate. I am stands complete. This is why every attempt to finish the sentence weakens its power. The divine I am does not need definition. The moment we say, I am this or I am that, we have reduced the infinite to form. We have taken the name of God and bound it to appearances. But God said plainly, I am that I am, not what you think I am, not what you need me to be, simply what I am. The true function of I am in spiritual life is to return consciousness to its source. It is the reminder, not spoken, but felt, that there is only one self, one life, one presence. When this is recognized, prayer changes, healing changes, living changes. There is no longer a sense of approaching God, for one discovers that God has always been present as the very awareness that seeks him. The prophet Isaiah heard God say, I, even I, am the Lord, and beside me there is no Savior. Not I and you together, not I responding to you, but I alone. When this is understood, the burden of spiritual effort lifts. One no longer tries to use God for protection, for supply, or for healing. One rests in the recognition that God is the protection, the supply, and the healing. In this recognition, I am ceases to be a phrase and becomes an atmosphere. It is felt as stillness, as assurance, as quiet knowing. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not argue with appearances. It simply remains untouched by change, unmoved by fear. Underneath are the everlasting arms. And so the true function of I am is fulfilled, not when it is spoken repeatedly, but when it is recognized silently. When consciousness rests there, life begins to arrange itself without direction. Harmony appears without management. Guidance arises without seeking. The human sense of self finds that it no longer needs to declare anything at all. We do not live from the words I am. We live from the presence they reveal. And once that presence is known, the words themselves become unnecessary. They have done their work. And now, as we move forward, there is yet another unfolding before us, one that touches daily experience directly. For even when recognition has begun, there are moments when the old habit of effort returns. What happens then? What do we do when the urge to affirm arises again? My friends, even after recognition has begun to dawn, even after the soul has tasted something of the stillness where truth reveals itself, there will come moments when the old habit returns, a challenge appears, a discomfort arises. Fear whispers its familiar suggestions, and almost without thought, the urge arises to speak, to affirm, to declare, to do something spiritual in order to regain a sense of control. This urge is not a failure. It is simply the residue of a lifetime lived from the belief that the human self must manage existence. We need not resist it, and we need not indulge it. Resistance gives it power. Indulgence gives it expression. Instead, we meet it with understanding. When the impulse to affirm arises, pause, not outwardly, but inwardly. Do not rush to correct the thought. Do not argue with it. Do not attempt to replace it with a better one. Simply become aware of the one who is aware. This is the moment of grace. Ask quietly within, not as a question demanding an answer, but as a turning of attention. Who is it that feels the need to affirm? Is it the divine I am, complete and whole? Or is it the human sense of self, anxious to secure itself against uncertainty? In this gentle noticing, the answer reveals itself without words. The divine presence never urges itself into expression. It never anxiously declares its sufficiency. It simply is. I am the Lord. I change not. The need to affirm belongs to the changing sense of self, the one that believes it can be threatened, diminished, or improved. And when this is seen, not judged, but seen, the urge begins to soften. At this point, do nothing. This is perhaps the most difficult counsel the human mind can receive. Do nothing. Do not speak. Do not repeat. Do not correct. Let the moment pass in awareness. In that stillness, you may feel a subtle shift, as though something within has stepped back and made room. That something is the false claimant to identity. In this resting, truth does not need to be affirmed. It asserts itself. The presence that you are becomes quietly evident. There may be no words, no sensation, no dramatic reassurance, and yet, beneath the surface, something has changed. The struggle has ceased. The need to manage has relaxed. And where struggle ends, grace enters. The psalmist wrote, "Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart." Waiting is not passivity. It is the refusal to interfere. It is the willingness to let God be God. When you wait in this way, the divine activity that has always been present begins to be felt. If words do arise in such moments, let them arise naturally, not as affirmations, not as declarations, but as acknowledgments. A simple "thank you, Father," spoken inwardly, is not an attempt to change anything. It is the recognition that nothing needs to be changed. Gratitude, in this sense, is not for outcomes, it is for being. Over time, as this understanding deepens, you will notice something beautiful. The urge to affirm will arise less frequently, not because you are suppressing it, but because there is less fear to trigger it. And when it does arise, it will no longer carry urgency. It will be met with the quiet smile of recognition, and it will pass like a cloud across the sky. This is the way the human sense of self gently loosens its grip, not through force, not through discipline, but through understanding. And as it loosens, the divine self stands revealed, not as something you reach, but as the ground upon which you have always stood. From this point, life begins to take on a different character. There is less doing and more allowing, less effort and more flow. And we find ourselves living, not from words spoken in hope, but from a presence known in silence. And so we come naturally to the next unfolding, for when we no longer try to use truth, something remarkable happens. Life begins to live itself through us. My friends, when the impulse to use truth finally loosens its hold, when the human sense of self no longer feels responsible for making life work, a great simplicity dawns. This simplicity is not achieved, it is revealed. It is the natural state of consciousness when the burden of doership has fallen away. To live without using truth does not mean to abandon truth. On the contrary, it means to live so deeply within it that there is no longer any thought of employing it. Truth is no longer something we turn to in moments of difficulty. It becomes the atmosphere in which all moments are lived. As the Apostle Paul said, "In him we live and move and have our being." When truth is no longer used, it ceases to be a means to an end. It is no longer approached for healing, for supply, or for protection. It is recognized as the very substance of being itself. And from that recognition, healing, supply, and protection appear, not because they have been sought, but because they are inherent in the divine presence. This is where many are tempted to feel that something essential has been lost. The mind wonders, if I am not affirming, if I am not declaring, if I am not directing my thought, what will happen? But this question arises only because the mind has not yet fully trusted the nature of God. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. When understanding yields, trust becomes natural. Living without using truth means that life is no longer treated as a problem to be solved. Challenges may still appear, but they no longer define identity. The mind may register circumstances, but the heart rests in a deeper knowing. The appearance is seen, but it is not believed to be the final authority. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. In this way of living, prayer changes its nature entirely. Prayer is no longer an appeal to God, nor a request for intervention. Prayer becomes communion. It is the silent awareness of presence. It is the recognition that there is nothing to ask for, because there is nothing absent. Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. When truth is not used, the human sense of self gradually discovers that it has never been the source of wisdom, strength, or direction. Ideas arise without strain. Decisions are made without anxiety. Right action unfolds without planning, not because one has become passive, but because one has ceased interfering with the divine activity already in motion. This is the meaning behind Jesus' words, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light. The yoke is easy because it is not carried by the human self. The burden is light because it is not borne personally. Life is lived from a deeper center, where the divine intelligence moves freely, unobstructed by fear or control. To live without using truth is to discover that truth lives you. You no longer attempt to apply spiritual principles to human situations. You find that situations resolve themselves in the presence of understanding. You no longer watch conditions anxiously to see whether truth is working. You rest in the certainty that truth has never ceased to be. As this way of living stabilizes, something remarkable becomes evident. Peace is no longer dependent on outcomes. Joy is no longer tied to success. Security is no longer rooted in circumstances. These qualities are recognized as attributes of being, not rewards for effort. The kingdom of God is not meat and drink, but righteousness and peace and joy in the Holy Ghost. And so we find ourselves living not from effort, not from repetition, not from assertion, but from quiet confidence. The world has not changed, but our relationship to it has. We move through experience as witnesses rather than managers, as participants rather than controllers. And in this freedom, life unfolds with a harmony that cannot be forced and need not be maintained. This brings us naturally to the closing movement of this unfolding. For when truth is no longer used, something final and beautiful is revealed. We discover that the I Am was never something we had to reach. It was always the life that has been living us. My friends, we come now to the place where all spiritual unfoldment begins and ends, not in words, not in practice, not in understanding, but in rest. Not the rest of sleep, not the rest of inactivity, but the rest that comes when the soul ceases its labor and abides in being. There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. This is the rest where affirmations are no longer needed, not because they have been forbidden, but because they have been fulfilled. One does not continue to point toward the sun once the sun has risen. One does not continue to knock when the door stands open. In this resting, the need to say I am dissolves, because the presence of I am has been recognized as the very substance of awareness. Here, there is no longer a seeker trying to reach truth. There is no longer a human self attempting to become spiritual. The striving has ended, not by discipline, but by discovery. The one who struggled to affirm has gently disappeared. And in that disappearance, peace reveals itself. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Resting here does not mean withdrawing from life. It means living life from a different center. You still move, speak, act, and respond, but not from anxiety, not from effort, not from the belief that something essential is missing. You move as one who knows inwardly and quietly that life is being lived through you. It is not ye that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaketh in you. In this resting, the old questions lose their urgency. Am I doing this right? Am I spiritual enough? Will this work? These questions fall away, not because they have been answered, but because the one who asked them has stepped aside. And in that stepping aside, the divine order asserts itself without resistance. Healing in this consciousness is no longer an event. It is the natural state of being. Supply is no longer something to be obtained. It is recognized as the infinite outflow of divine life. Guidance is no longer sought anxiously. It arises spontaneously, as naturally as breath. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. Resting here, you may still hear the words I am from time to time, not as thoughts to be repeated, not as declarations to be made, but as a quiet sense of presence, a deep knowing beneath all thought. You may feel it in moments of stillness or in the midst of ordinary activity. You may recognize it not as something dramatic, but as something profoundly familiar, closer than breath, nearer than hands and feet. This is the place Jesus spoke from when he said, "I and my Father are one," not a claim to be imitated, but a truth to be realized. This is the place the psalmist knew when he wrote, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Want ceases not because conditions change, but because identity is known. And so we leave this unfolding not with a new practice, not with a new method, not even with a new understanding to hold on to. We leave it with an invitation to rest, to abide, to allow the truth that has always been present to live itself as you. Abide in me, and I in you. Nothing more is required. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be maintained. The I am has never been absent. It has never waited for affirmation. It has never depended on understanding. It has simply been. Let us then rest in that being. Let us walk gently from this place, carrying nothing but awareness. And in that awareness, life will unfold as it always has, by grace, in order, and in peace.